Hello, good evening. This is Bill Carroll of Zenny62 Media, and I'm going to be going into a little, not too much depth, but a little bit of discussion of all the quarterbacks that are invited to the combine and what they did and didn't do, and what someone might expect of them at the next level. EJ Perry of Brown is a guy who was there as a quote unquote throwing quarterback, and it means essentially that to not overwork some of the quarterbacks that were invited there as actual combine I mean, everyone gets evaluated. I mean, Tony Romo famously, amongst others, was invited initially as a throwing quarterback. I think Warner might have been as well. Will not quote me on that. But essentially, you're there. You get to do a full workout and everything, but they're trying to take some of the load off of the primary quarterbacks. He's from Brown University. Came in at 6'1", 5/8 of an inch, 211 pounds. Ran a 4.6, which is very nice, and then a 6'8", 5'3" cone, which prompts the whole Gene Edelman jokes or whatever. I mean, he theoretically is a guy that could make the move. 34 and a half inch vertical, 10.3 in the broad, and he showed like he didn't have a pop gun arm. I mean, his arm is strong enough to make virtually all of the throws you'd ever need to make in an NFL setting, but he needs development. And we do have some developmental leagues, right? The USFL is up and running. The XFL may soon be up and running. He's a guy who's a candidate for something like that. A guy who's sort of in that same boat, though more well known, is Brock Purdy from Iowa State. At one point, I know some people had him in their top 3 or 4 quarterbacks. A few years ago, he's obviously shown that that's not really where he belongs. Came in at 6 feet 5/8 of an inch, 212 pounds. Ran a 4.7 640, 7.213 cone, 4.45 short shuttle, 27-inch vertical, which is probably the most surprising number of all those. I mean, that's not a great number. But once again, a guy that if he's going to make it, will have to make it as a developmental guy. Skyler Thompson, once again, sort of the same sort of place for him. A little more arm talent, I think, than Purdy. But once again, a little less athletic than I thought he'd be. 4.86 in the 40, though 7 flat 3 cone, which is solid. 4.28 the short shuttle. 31-inch vertical, which is average, and 9.4 in the broad. Once again, a guy that needs to develop someplace. One of my favorites, and I'm going to admit my biases up front, was Dustin Crumb. He sort of won the way in. He came in at 210. He was a guy that was sort of slender at 6 feet even. Sorry, 6'1" even. He ran a 4.75, which once again for him is a win. He's not super athletic. Did the short shuttle at 4.36, and that's the only other athletic testing he did. A career backup, I think, at the next level, but I am a fan. I think he could develop. De'Eric King is a guy that could possibly be a position switch because he's 5'8" and 3/4, which even in this era of people being a little more understanding, a little more accepting of shorter quarterbacks, he's still probably a little too short. And he has very short arms. I mean, who am a couple inches shorter than he is, my arms are almost 4 inches longer than his. Now, I have unusually long arms for my height, but if you're going to be a shorter quarterback, you need to have very large hands and very long arms. And his hands are right around average for a man his size, at 9 1/4. But they're not going to be a fan of his other physical dimensions, and he didn't do a full workout. Once again, he's pretty beaten up from the season, so I get that. Same deal with Matt Corral. Came in at 6'1" and 5/8, 212 pounds, and didn't do anything other than the meet and greet. A few other guys I want to make sure I mention amongst the quarterbacks. The guy that sort of won this is what a lot of NFL GMs still think an NFL quarterback looks like award. It goes to Jack Cohen from Notre Dame by way of Wisconsin, obviously. 6'3" and 1/4, 218 pounds, 9.5-inch hands, which is slightly above average. 4.9 in the 40, which is slightly below average, but a 6'9", 5'3" cone. Didn't see that coming. If someone told me that out of that whole group, the second passes 3 cone was going to be Cone, I would have called you a liar to your face. That's what I would have done. Then moving on to the next guy after that, with the Kenny Pickett came in as a good athlete, and like I said, everyone sort of lost their minds about his hands. He does have smaller hands than average for a possible NFL quarterback, and 4.29 short shuttle, 33.5-inch vert, which is a little bit above average, and a 10 feet 1 inch broad, which is actually well above average. So he's a good athlete, is what that comes down to. And I mentioned in another video, I sort of comped him to a little bit like a guy like Derek Carr. Kaleb Eleby, didn't do a full workout, though he did do the vertical, didn't do well on it. In fact, I think I might have you, Caleb. There might be somebody I could actually beat in the vert. 25.5 inches is not awesome. In my prime, I was 34 inches, but that's a long time ago. I might be more like around his speed, and a 7'5", 7'3" cone is shocking to me because I thought he was a better athlete than that. But he's 6 feet 3/4 of an inch, 208 pounds. He has a very live arm for a guy his size. Just didn't have a great day in terms of the athletic testing. Another guy who came in as a quote-unquote throwing quarterback, and he can really throw, is Kelley, a very large quarterback prospect. Kelley, a former Arkansas prospect who made his way to Southeast Louisiana and lit it up. Like I said, big kid with a big arm, and came in at 6'7" and 3/8", 249 pounds, and didn't do a full athletic workout, which once again, I wish he had because he's a good athlete, but he showed you everything you want to see in terms of arm talent and when he got to the throwing. And I sort of dealt with the guys who were in tier 2 and tier 3. I'm going to shift to I guess the upper part of tier 2 and maybe even tier 1. I guess Carroll should be mentioned there as well. A guy that I like probably more than most is Carson Strong. And we've talked about the fact that he had to have cartilage removed due to it dying, in essence, heading towards becoming necrotic and being replaced by, ironically enough, cadaverous cartilage. But once again, it's not the kind of injury that precludes, really anything. He didn't do any athletic testing, but I think he moves well enough. Okay, so a few things to tell you about him. He played in an offense that, is rooted sort of in a lot of air raid principles, but tweaks it a little bit, and there's a lot more down the field throwing and a lot more things done at the line of scrimmage than in some versions of air raid. And don't have time to get into how not everybody's air raid is the same, but trust me, I will get to a video that talks about sort of different flavors of air raid and how they aren't all identical. But in his version, like I said, he does a little bit more than the line of scrimmage and does a little bit driving the ball down the field as some others do. Things I like about him. Once again, good-sized kid, right? Sort of like Jack Cohen, sort of the classic quarterback from another era, 6'3" and 3/8", 226, and didn't do any athletic testing, but once again, through and through well. I think he's a guy that probably comes in as a sort of highly prized free agent type. Not free agent, but he gets drafted. Sorry, what am I saying? A highly prized backup and turns to a starter. And he's, to me, just a notch below a guy like Desmond Ridder. In fact, he's mechanically a little bit ahead of Ridder, but Ritter's clearly a much, much, much better athlete. And Ridder has worked on his mechanics, and it shows. He came in at 6'3" and 3/8", 211. Once again, still a little skinny, but 4 pounds above, I believe, what he weighed at the Senior Bowl. And you'd like to see him put on another 10, 15 pounds. I'm sure he will. 10-inch hands, which is well above average. Ran a 4.49, which is fantastic. He profiles athletically as a almost Mariota type athlete. 7.153 cone, which is above average. 4.29 short shuttle, which is slightly above average. 36 inch vertical, well above average. 10.7 broad, well above average. He's a super athlete and a guy who's coming along as a passer. And now to the guys that I think have the best chance to be sort of long-term-ish starters in the NFL level. Sam Howell is a guy who thinks a little bit of a project. People sort of compare him to either Russell Wilson or you'll hear a lot of Baker Mayfield. I think he's not that much like either of them. I think that despite sort of, some obvious physical resemblances, I really see sort of a right-handed version of Mark Brunell when I watch him. Not only the fact of sort of a thicker build, but, some of the strengths and weaknesses of Brunell. But getting into Howell himself, came in at 6 feet and 5/8", 218 pounds. He 9 1/8 inch, which is just above the threshold in terms of hands. Good athlete, but he's still, once again, coming back from the season and didn't do a full workout. And then, of course, the sort of star of the show is Malik Willis, who didn't do a full workout. And part of that, I think, is the whole sort of cultural thing about sort of being a smaller black quarterback, going to prove that I'm a quarterback. But he's a good athlete. We all know it. 6 feet and a half, 219 pounds, and live arm. Still, there's things that, you can't see in a combine setting that he still needs to work on. But he truly does have the potential to become a long-term star in the NFL. And I think if he goes to a system where, one, he does get moved around, and two, you don't need him to maybe operate all parts of the offense from day one and allow him to develop, I think he could really, like I said, end up being a long-term starter for a long, long time. And I think of sort of a teeny tiny version of David Garrard, or frankly, a guy who has some things in common, even with a better version, I'd say, of a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Smaller, obviously, but a guy who got some of those same strengths and still needs to work a little bit on his judgment down the field, but I think he'll get there. Move on to running backs next.